Thank you very much for staying with us on the AM show. And it's all about the extractive industry. This morning, our sister station, 99.7 Joy FM on radio, is talking about how some people smuggle gold. And we'll be telling you a bit more about that right here on this network. But here, too, we talk about our natural resources, what we are doing with them, how we're tapping into them, whether it's feeding into our development, and where we ought to take a critical look at our policies. And that is why this morning we have a discussion on that very subject. The Natural Resources Governance Institute joining us for this discussion. For the discussion, the key personalities we're going to be interacting with: Nasir Alfa Mohammed, Policy Advocacy Officer with the NRGI. We also have a known face, Dr. Steve Mantiao, co-chair of Gaiety. He is the campaign coordinator for ISODEC. And then there is Benjamin Boachi, Executive Director of ASEP. All of them joining us as we dig into these all-important matters. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the AM show this morning.
Thanks for having us.
So I'll start with you, Nasir. In the last few days, we've had this virtual gathering where indeed you have espoused some of what we ought to know when it comes to the extractive industry in Ghana. What has been the focus, basically, of these virtual meetings that you've had, and what would you say have been the key points that have been brought to bear following that?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good morning to all your viewers and listeners. If you look at the extractive industries generally, you can approach it from different angles. It could be commercial, it could be by law and policy, or several other angles that you can approach it. But our aim for convening this national dialogue had to do with the evolution of the policies and laws governing the extractive sector. And this was a two-day dialogue spanning the 24th and 25th, I guess, spanning the 16th and 17th of this month, actually. The first day was focused on the mining sector, the oil and gas sector, while the second day was focused on the mining sector. Our main aim was to represent the existing policies that we have, governing these sectors, and then to see whether these policies are adequate enough for, enhancing extractive governance in this country. And if they are not, what policy options do we have for government actors and the ministries going forward? This was basically what the two-day program was all about. So we discussed issues to do with mining policy, oil and gas policy, including revenue management in the oil and gas sector as opposed to the mining sector. We discussed issues to do with resource-backed loans and tying it lightly with that of the EJAPA transaction that happened recently, even though we did not focus more on EJAPA. But basically, our duty or the main aim of convening the two-day dialogue was to ensure that we audit our policies and laws so far and give recommendations for improving a sector going forward.
Now,
this
you
was
make
the main reasons why.
Right. You make mention of, some of these policies, and we've had quite a number of them, laws governing our extractive sector. It is also worthy of note that we've been, extracting minerals from our, country, or our soil, I should say, for over a century. And when it comes to oil, for example, we've been doing that for over a decade. What would you say has been the role, the impact of civil society in that drive, in shaping policy when it comes to the extractive industry?
Thanks a lot. I think civil society has been very, very passionate and involved when it comes to the evolution of extractive sector laws and policies. I mean, going back even to the independence days, I believe civil society was very active. But more recently, as you indicated, in terms of the last decade and focusing on oil and gas, civil society has been so much involved that, but for civil society, the Revenue Management Act, that's the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, wouldn't have had some transparency and accountability bodies and principles inherent in it. So, for example, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee was a baby of civil society that pushed so much for it to be included in the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. You go to the Ghana Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. This is a multi-stakeholder body that comprises civil society, government actors, and the companies involved in the mining sector. And you can see the wonders that the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative is actually doing in the mining sector, auditing mining transactions and actually giving us the actual state of what is going on in the mining sector and giving recommendations for enhancing our future trajectory. The same applies to the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. In the last 10 years, you can check the PIAC reports from 2011 to mid-2020, and you would see the kind of good work that PIAC has been doing over the years. And all these are championed by civil society. Of the 13 membership of PIAC, almost everybody is a representative of civil society. And so you can imagine how PIAC is influencing policy and influencing law in this country. PIAC reports, for example, to the His Excellency the President, to Parliament, and to the people of Ghana. And in all this, government is minded about PIAC recommendations and the fact that the public is aware of all these recommendations, and it's taking steps to remedy some of these things. I mean, some of them have already been remedied anyway, but we still have a long way to go, and that explains why this two-day dialogue was even more important, especially so when we have a new minister coming into the energy ministry,
right.
A new minister coming into the lands and natural resources ministry. And even though we have technical staff in these two ministries, it is still important that we have the angle of civil society going forward, especially when we've just visited some controversial transactions in the last year.
Okay.
So for us, our conversation was very timely. It will inform policy direction of the incoming ministries and even the government in general. So basically, that was what.
Okay. Let me quickly move on and interact with Mr. Benjamin Boakye, Executive Director for ASAP. Now, the bankers will talk about non-performing loans, but in that virtual engagement, you were talking about non-performing petroleum or upstream petroleum contracts, among others. First of all, a lot of the time we hear upstream, downstream. Can you break it down for us what exactly you were referring to? And is this a positive outlook, if you like, or is it negative for Ghana, this whole bit that you were talking about in that virtual engagement?
Thank you very much. I think, as Nasser indicated, a lot of development has occurred since we started producing oil. And one of the positive aspects was for us to change the way we had given petroleum blocks to prospective contractors. And essentially before oil production, we're doing what we call an open door policy, where you invite contractors to come in and you give them the block. And that changed to competitive tendering to ensure that we can attract investors with capacity to help us produce oil. It is important for an oil producer to sustain production and improve on reserves, because once it becomes part of your economy, you want to ensure that your companies that are aligned, your citizens that are aligned to that industry will continue to be engaged economically. So the way to do that is really to improve on your oil reserves to ensure that the industry will grow. And that was the essence of actually ensuring that there is competition that ensures that companies with capacity would actually take up our oil blocks. But before that, we had been giving out oil blocks to many companies, through the direct negotiation or the open door policy. And what we have found over the period is that most of these companies are not performing. When we say upstream, we're talking about contracts that actually ensure that we find oil and produce the oil. So contracts that deals with the production, exploration and production of petroleum in Ghana. So these contracts have not been performing. And instead of actioning the terms of the contract, we are not doing so. We allow them to hang on to the oil blocks, and we keep giving them extensions, even though they don't deserve those extensions. And that really raised a lot of concern as to how these companies are able to get the extensions whilst they are not performing. If you allow that to happen, very soon you're going to have your oil production decline, and you are not replacing reserves. You don't have any new fields coming on stream. Once oil is produced, you don't have it. So you have to keep finding more oil so you can sustain your production. But it doesn't look like it for Ghana, because we are producing what we have discovered, and we are not adding to our reserves, because we are not ensuring that these companies who have taken up the blocks are actually performing. And some of the reasons why some companies will take blocks and hold on to it without performing is for speculative reasons. So they have the block, they're just watching to see what the next block close by is doing. And once there's a discovery, the prospectivity of their block goes up, they sell, make money, and go away. So they are not here to really work and discover oil for Ghana. So we have to ensure that they work or give up the blocks so that we can engage contractors who are serious and who want to work on the block so we can discover oil. So we have only 3 fields producing. Jubilee is hitting plateau, and they're going to start declining. Same with 10 in the next 5 years. And then you have Sankofa also coming on declining. So if we don't hurriedly ensure that we have companies who can perform and give them the blocks, we're going to have these blocks declining. We're not going to have the revenues. And mind you also, we have tied some specific programs to oil revenue, particularly the free SHS, which is receiving substantial support from oil revenue. So if you don't have the revenues coming, how are you going to be able to sustain those programs that you have aligned with oil? So it is very urgent that we get serious and remove those political considerations that allow these companies to hold on to the blocks without performing, and allow us to attract investors who can actually produce oil.
So we're looking at the extractive industry, we're looking at the precious metals, we're looking at oil and gas. Now, let's focus briefly on gas, because that's something, natural gas to be specific, that's something you brought to the fore at that virtual engagement a few days ago. And you spoke about how it's becoming the backbone of the power sector. The question, though, is, first of all, to do with the excess supply of natural gas in the system and even non-payment issues. How much of a problem is that really?
I think perhaps it's one of the biggest problems. You can even rate it above COVID, if you like.
Wow.
Because we have a significant financial difficulty consuming our own gas, and also the challenge with the imported gas. I mean, when we discovered oil and gas, we decided that we would take up the commercialization of the gas. So we set up, Ghana Gas to process the Jubilee gas. And then we asked GNI, who had also discovered gas resources, to produce that. And for them to be able to recover that investment, they had extensive agreement that grants them a take-or-pay arrangement, so that if we do not take the gas, we still have to pay them, because they have procured debt to be able to develop the infrastructure. But what we have seen is that we have been slow in taking the easy actions of ensuring that the power plants were in the right place to consume the gas, and also ensuring that allied industries could come on to take the gas. So we had a situation where you had the gas being produced and we were not ready. So it took us about a year to subsequently move car power to the west to be able to consume the gas. But we still have a challenge, really, paying for the entire volume of the gas that is supposed to be produced. So as of now, we are doing about 60–70% of the gas that is actually produced in Ghana. At the same time, we are importing gas from Nigeria, and we haven't been able to deal with that situation. So Ghana is paying over $200 million for gas that we don't consume every year, all right? And whilst fixing that problem, in fact, we've been very slow at fixing that problem, government is also planning to import gas through GNPC. And we struggle to appreciate that you have this debt burden from your own domestic sources. We've not been able to optimize it. And you are importing more gas, through LNG, which we estimate will be another $300 million burden on Ghana every year for no gas needed, right? So it's a major problem that we need to immediately take steps to revert so that we don't hang this on citizens. And the taxes that are coming, right? Some are coming based on the negligence and poor decisions that have been taken in the past in the power sector. And the fact that we're not even able to optimize the gas, which keeps piling up the debt, which citizens have to pay for ultimately. If more gas is imported, it is not the politicians who will pay. It is the citizens who will be called upon, either through extension of EXLA or introduction of a new levy, for us to be able to pay for that debt. So this is the time, really, for us to take the prudent decisions to ensure that we don't, pile up this more debt through the gas sector. And also the critical need for us to ensure that the companies that are aligned to ENI and the gas producers don't collapse because we are importing gas from another country. If they don't produce, the local contractors don't get contracts. All right, so there is a whole business linked to our own domestic resources that we need to actually optimize and also encourage investors into the gas production arena. Because if they see you importing gas, then there is no incentive for you to come and invest in Ghana to look for gas or oil, and that is the truth about this whole investment attraction in the upstream oil and gas sector. So the steps that we are taking, beyond burdening the taxpayer, we are also providing a disincentive for companies to come to Ghana to actually invest in our oil and gas industry.
Let me move on now to Dr. Steve Manteau, and you have been in this space for a very long time, sometimes even courting disfavor from certain quarters, but you've been at this for quite a while. And at the outset, for example, over a decade ago when we struck oil, there was talk of the Dutch disease. Maybe we've not come full circle to that proper, but what would you see or say are the major challenges facing the mining sector, the extractive sector in Ghana today? Dr. Steve Manteau, I would have you unmute, actually, your Zoom. It appears to be muted still, so we can't hear what you're saying. And then you could start with your submission, sir.
Right. Thank you very much. I think as a country, we haven't quite demonstrated enough seriousness in terms of our intent of maximizing our benefits from resource extraction. Now, this is a country that produced gold, combined colonial and post-independence era, 100 years, and ended up a poorly indebted, a highly indebted poor country, which speaks of the fact that we haven't quite managed our mineral revenues very well. I need to make the point that if you look at the mining sector, only about 5% of the total value of the industry is retained within the local economy, and that is not too good. The reason we are where we are is because we have been extracting resources without a national vision. The vision in terms of what role we expect mineral and petroleum resources to play in the national economy. If you look at our minerals and mining policy, for example, they are anchored on medium-term policies. It talks about the Ghana poverty reduction strategy and stuff like that. You agree with me, all these medium-term policies have lapsed. And if you still have a mineral and mining policy hinged on such policies, then you see what the disconnect is. I mean, what we need as a country is a long-term development plan on which we hinge all our national policies, especially for the mineral sector. Because we haven't done this, you find that by and large, we've taken our mineral royalty over the years in cash, instead of maybe taking them in kind, as we do in the oil sector. So the opportunity you miss is that of value addition. So you take your raw gold, send it to the international market, and sell. And then you bring in the money, and even we are not able to properly account for the money. If we are minded to have an integrated mining sector in this country, we would have actually fashioned our laws that prohibit the export of raw gold. And then what you do is that you refine your gold locally, you add value to them, you produce jewelry and export jewelry instead of raw material gold.
Well, a bit of a challenge there when it comes to the connection with Dr. Steve. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
Yes. So the value in actually having this integrated mining sector is that by adding value to your gold production, you are actually creating jobs. And as you create jobs, the companies themselves will pay taxes. The workers will also pay taxes. So you are creating new tax opportunities to finance your national development. We haven't done this, and so we've lost out on a lot of the opportunities that value addition affords this country. Look, again, because we have acted without vision, we have a situation where we have huge iron deposits in this country. And to create an integrated steel industry, you need iron and you need manganese. But here's a case, we have exported almost all our quality manganese outside this country. So what do we do when we come to exploit our iron resources? We may have to import manganese if we are minded to create a steel industry in this country. That is not good enough. Thirdly, let me give another example. We cited our Atuabo gas processing facility on our prime silica deposit sites in this country. And so we lose the opportunity of, in future, exploiting our silica sand for industrial production, maybe for the purpose of manufacturing solar panels to help this country make a shift towards renewable energy. And so if you're not guided by a clear vision, which is articulated and everybody works to it, there's a way in which you lose out. All you get is just the revenue, and even the revenue is not much, and you are not even managing it efficiently. Look at the mineral sector. We do not have any framework for managing mineral revenues in this country. In fact, the MPP government in 2016 promised Ghanaians that when they come to power, they are going to actually hand us with a comprehensive, consolidated mineral revenue management framework. What they've actually done since they've been in power is to give us EJAPA, which is a far cry from what they promised us. EJAPA does not manage or seek to manage the entire mineral revenues. They seek to manage the royalty component. And again, it is not comprehensive. It does not have mechanisms for managing the volatility effect of mineral revenues on our budget. It does not have citizens' oversight arrangements to ensure that those who take decisions in our name do proper due diligence and act in good faith. And so there's a way in which what is being offered also lacks the ability to deliver good returns to this country. Okay,
so Doc, let's quickly take a look at this. You just strayed into the EJAPA conversation, maybe not technically strayed because it is tied very much to what we are discussing. And it's a dire verdict you give in terms of that. But we also know that on the ECOWAS front, there is Agenda 2063, which seeks to, harness the entirety of the sub-region and ensure that moving forward, we're getting the sort of gains we need for development for the people when it comes to the extractive industry. What then would you say are the sorts of policies we need here in Ghana to bring about some of the things you are talking about, the plus size rather than the negatives we are seeing?
Well, incidentally, the African Union has taken interest in this matter and has spearheaded the creation of what is known as the African Mining Vision, which is a blueprint for all resource-dependent countries in Africa to kind of follow in order to improve the governance of their resources so they can increase their returns from the sector. However, as a country, all we have done by way of compliance with the African Mining Vision is to commission a study on a gap analysis between where we ought to be and where we currently are. Beyond that, we've done nothing more. We have not taken any concrete steps towards aligning the governance of our natural resources with the precepts of the African Mining Vision. And that actually speaks or emphasizes how as a people, we haven't been really seriously minded to improve the governance of our natural resources in this country.
So, local content, for example, local participation in this industry. That also appears to be a problem. You brought it to the fore in this virtual engagement. Why exactly is local content or local participation in the extractive industry a problem? And what exactly is the problem?
You see, if you were to look at the typical spend of the mining industry, you will find that the local content budget, procurement budget of the companies, are far in excess of what they pay by way of taxes and royalties to the government. And so as a country, if we were to position ourselves to actually capture a bit of this huge procurement budget of the companies, there's a way in which we can optimize our returns and benefits. Here's a case, we realized this and therefore created a local content regulations. Following that, we actually identified a list of about 28 to 29 items that must be procured within the local economy. And yet, over the years, we've done very little in terms of building local manufacturing capability to be able to deliver on these 28 or 29 items. Look, we have a government industrialization flagship program in the name of One District, One F, but it is in no way aligned with the mining list in a way that helps us to build the manufacturing capability to take advantage of the local content opportunities in the mining sector. Again, it tells you how, how negligent we've been in terms of doing the necessary things to enable us raking the due benefits from our resource sector.
So what would be your proposal then? What are the policy measures? Again, I go back because as we discuss these things, there must be some solution, something you're proffering to the powers that be. What would you say ought to be done to push this agenda forward so that local content, local participation is improved?
First and foremost, I think it's very important to take another look at our governance framework and take steps to kind of, following the identification of the gaps between the African mining vision and where we currently are, take steps to align the governance of the sector with the African mining vision. Two, we need to, again, ensure proper sequencing of the governance arrangements in the sector. For instance, it makes no sense to me to pass a Minerals and Mining Act in 2006, Act 703, and then come back in 2014 to actually adopt a minerals and mining policy. It's a complete misnomer. The policy always must precede the law. And so, be that as it may, we have had the law preceding the policy. Now is the time to step back and ensure that there is coherence between the policy and the law. So we may now have to review the law and ensure that the law actually operationalizes the policy. Thirdly, we need to actually review our practice of continuing to export our manganese in its raw form when we know that we have huge iron deposits, and in future we're going to need the manganese to be able to create a steel industry for this country. Fourthly, we need to get government to align the One District, One Factory with the mining list, the list of items required by law to be procured within the Ghanaian economy, and ensure that we take advantage of this program to build the national capability to actually take advantage of the mining list. This will be some of the few urgent steps that I think we need to take to improve the outcome of mining in this country.
Before I return to our other guests, I just want to sneak in this bit because you made mention of EJAPA. It's been brought back to Parliament in whatever shape or form. How do you feel about that? Are you happy? Is it something you are concerned about? What is your reaction to the EJAPA royalties deal being brought back to Parliament?
Well, for me, it really has changed. Viewers will recall that in the heat of the controversy around EJAPA, the former special prosecutor conducted a corruption risk analysis of the transaction and came out with a damning verdict, which confirms the position of CSOs in this country. Following that, the president directed that the Minister of Finance and the Attorney General should go back to the drawing board, review the transaction, and incorporate the CSO concerns into the documentation and arrangements. Since then, we've had nothing. We've not been consulted as CSOs who have serious concerns about the transaction, only to be told recently by the president that the transaction will be going back to Parliament for approval. We haven't seen any draft documentation yet, and we are not too sure to what extent the concerns that we raise or we have been addressed in this new or revised documentation. But let me make the point that EJAPA as a vehicle is not the only concerns that we have. We also have concerns with the law itself. The Mineral Income Investment Fund Act is weak in many regards, and we think that that law also has to be redrawn and repaired if EJAPA is to go ahead. But for now, I think we will not preempt what do you call it, our position by making any comment at this moment. We'll wait till we see what has been done by government. Once the documentation is shared with us, if not, and we are able to assess it in our own way, we'll do our due diligence on it, and we'll make the public know what our position is.
Okay, let me come to Mr. Nasir now. So what next after this dialogue? Obviously, there are certain gains you are looking forward to making. What next after this dialogue?
Thank you so much. What we did was to come up with a communique, at the moment still in a draft form that we are reviewing, which we shall be sharing with the various ministries and other key actors in the industry to help, in enhancing the governance of the extractive sector going forward. And in this communique, we have itemized all of the challenges, but have also proffered solutions to these challenges in this communique. So the idea is to give the decision makers the opportunity of CSOs' opinion vis-a-vis the opinion of their technical staff back in their ministries, and then to look at the way forward with the benefit of these two positions. And we intended to divide the communique into two, a communique for the oil sector and a communique for the mining sector. The reason is simply this, that when you combine all of it, the Minister of Energy, for example, taking it, they just want to go straight to his oil sector issues. And then he's now have to be burdened with reading mining sector issues per se. And then likewise, the mining sector. So we're thinking of, either giving two different communiques, one focus on the mining and the other focus on oil and gas, or we may combine. We are still we are refining the communiques, and among the main speakers and the skylines would agree whether to make it one or to go by the two. But what is important is that we have identified the challenges we think are militating against the governance system in this country in terms of the extractive sector, and we have given our solutions, what we think can actually help enhance the governance sector, in those communities. But one thing that is more crucial also for us is for Ghana to look at the energy transition debate that is going on, and to ensure that we position ourselves also very well to address the energy transition issue in this country.
All right.
If you recall, this is a very important debate globally. It is so important that in 2020 alone, we have international oil companies, including British Petroleum, Shell, and Total, writing off oil projects to the tune of about $80 billion US. And that is as a result of downward revisions to their assumptions about long-term price for their products. Yet national oil companies, across the world, including our own GNPC, is yet to develop a strategy around mitigating the energy transition impact on, our governance system going forward. And so, if you look at GNPC, it is still a stated plan of GNPC to become a world-class operator, for example. And to become a world-class operator would mean assuming full operatorship of oil and gas fields and competing internationally, with other national oil companies or even international oil companies. Now the question is, at a time that the whole world is debating energy transition, we are also thinking about assuming world-class operatorship, where we shall assume full operatorship of oil and gas fields. That is not wrong in itself. The question is whether we have, the requisite data available to ensure that in our bid to move ahead with, oil and gas, operations using the GNPC as our vehicle, we have considered the impact.
So in other words, we need to do more on the local front to ensure that we're able to arrive at the right policies and the right developmental impacts that we're actually looking forward to as a country. Succinctly, in brief, that is basically what you're saying. Okay, so
exactly.
Gentlemen, this is where we're going to have to wrap up on the conversation. Unfortunately, I know that there's a lot more we could have said, but this is an ongoing conversation. And those who joined us for it, Benjamin Wachi, Executive Director with ASEP. We also had Mr. Nasir, who actually is Policy Advocacy Officer with the Natural Resource Governance Institute. And of course, an old dog in this industry, Dr. Steve Mantea, co-chair of GATE and campaign coordinator with ISODEC. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It's been a learning process, and hopefully the leaders have been listening to you and we can actually progress in this industry. Do have a good morning. But coming up next on the AM show, exploring Rwanda. JoyNews has partnered Rwandan High Commission to tell Rwanda's rich history, rich story, and that is up next with my colleague Gifty Andoapia.